to the stage Phnam Bagley and Mardis Bagley, founding Partners of Nonfiction.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Phnam Bagley.
My name is Mardis Bagley.
And today we're going to talk about space, and specifically living in space. The date is April 12, 1961. Yuri Gagarin goes to space, the first person to go to space for the very first time. And he experiences, extreme, body, extreme environments in space as he goes up and as he goes down. As he goes down, he experiences about 8G, which is quite extreme. And on his way back, he expressed to the world that when he was up there, that the Earth was so beautiful that we needed to preserve it, and that we were supposed to not destroy it. So that's what we wanted to talk to you today about, like how we should go to space, because for too long we have driven everything based on function, right? Engineers designing how we design our space habitats, which help us go up to space and come back alive. But we live in an era where we have to think a little bit beyond that, especially if the future of space is going to include the rest of us. So one idea that we wanted to think about is how should space feel like? So right now, when you look at the International Space Station, which is a space station that's been in space for about 25 years, there's a crazy accumulation of tools and equipment around. And it's like cognitively overwhelming for people to live in this environment. On top of that, from a sensory experience, it's extremely loud in this environment, like 60 to 70 decibel at all times. And just so you know, the threshold of comfort for the human ear is about 50 decibel. So 60 to 70 decibel is the equivalent of living on an airplane for about 6 months at a time. So what do these astronauts do up in space? For the most part, they live normal lives, sleeping at night, working during the day, entertaining themselves the rest of the time. And work covers, for the most part, scientific experiments, making sure that they maintain their bodies by working out and maintaining the station. And a lot of the time, their life is really regimented, right? Like as professional astronauts, that's their job. But more and more commercial space astronauts are going up there, and the expectation of what they're going to do up there is quite different. And so the idea that we want to put on this table here is how do we make a place like space feel like home? Mm-hmm. And the reason why home is so important as a place to look into is because it's so different from how we design space right now. So why is home so important? Home is the place where we can be vulnerable. Home is the place that is familiar. Home is the place that we have personalized for ourselves. And the way we've designed space and the space environment, as a space architect, I have to design how all of the materials and all of the equipment fits into the environment, whether it's in microgravity or partial gravity on the surface of the Moon or Mars. It's very difficult for people to integrate their personalities, their rituals, and their needs in these environments. And so some of the environments are going to be work-related, where these scientific experiments are going to happen, whether it's biotech experiments, new material manufacturing, and things like that. And then there are other types of environments that are more personal, like private quarters, where people sleep and where they enjoy personal time. One of the favorite parts of a space station or a crew transfer module area is typically a window, where people can spend hours looking at the Earth and how beautiful she is.
So another aspect is, let me take you to sleep. Now here on planet Earth, We dive into our bed. We've selected all the, the mattress, the pillow. We've refined our process over time. We dive in, and gravity sinks us into the comforter, and we really feel great. But what happens when we go into outer space? Turns out there's no gravity, obviously. So we're kind of floating around and sleeping at the same time, which sounds great until you bump into maybe the eject button on the space station, which hopefully does not exist. So we have to strap in our astronauts. They're kind of like small seat belts, and they just kind of keep people from moving around. And this allows them to get a bit of a better sleep. But sleep isn't really just about getting enough so you can get up and energetically move throughout the next day. It's about a cognitive load, right? So can we get a good enough sleep so our brain can relax and reset, so we can start to get up the next day and deal with all the challenges that we have to, especially on a spacecraft. This is really, really important. Good sleep affects our mood, affects our relationships, affects everything around us, and this is really about safety. So one of the things, in addition to good sleep, is you have to think about when you're in low Earth orbit at LEO, you're circling around the planet, and you get to see, 16 sunrises and sunsets every single day. Now, if something's going to mess up your circadian rhythm, that is definitely the start. So beyond that, more recently, we found that while you're strapped in and you're not floating around, your head does kind of move around as you sleep. These micro movements build up over time. And what this does is this causes what we call arterial dissection. And it is literally as bad as it sounds. It's when you damage the major arteries in your neck. So we talk about, at our company Nonfiction, when we're designing, we talk about things like designing for safety, comfort, and ease of use. Safety and comfort, obvious, right? Ease of use, why do we have that? Because if our guidelines aren't easy to use, they don't fall within the behavior, then ultimately people are going to not do the things that keep them safe or comfortable. So with our company, we designed a device that focuses more deeply on this sleep. And it's a neurostimulator that you put on your head for 15 minutes just before you fall asleep. It stimulates the prefrontal cortex, and by doing that, it sort of mimics the act of sleeping. You start to feel a little bit drowsy. It mimics those brain waves. And then once you kind of push the brain in the right direction, it wants to follow. And your brain starts to ease into the 4 phases of sleep, in 1, 2, 3, and REM sleep, which we all know. So the beauty of this is suddenly we can maintain all of our bad habits. So we can watch cell phones, turn on the TV, and potentially experience 16 sunsets and sunrises every single day and still get up with a healthy, active mind to take on the challenges of the day.
So Mardis just talked about a lot of the sensory experiences and the neuroscience behind sleep, and good rest, which not only, as you say, affects the mood, but also longevity. Living in space, you actually age much faster. And there were studies done with twins, for example, where Scott Kelly stayed in space for about a year as his twin brother, Mark Kelly, stayed on Earth. And there were some comparative studies between the two, kind of like figuring out how quickly we age in space. And so another aspect of being in space for a long time, or for a visit, is feeling safe and supported in space. So here we're going to dig deep into the sensory experiences. So starting with the visual. When you are in space, contrary on Earth, your blood is spread evenly throughout your body. That's why when you look at astronauts in microgravity, they have very skinny legs and pretty big faces, right? And what that does is that it messes up with what our biology is used to. So some astronauts actually experience blindness because of that. And so when we see things, we actually experience them consciously or subconsciously. We're not necessarily aware of the sunrise every day, or how bright midday is, or how beautiful a sunset is, especially when we're outdoors on this planet. But in space, it can give us some clues on how the days pass, and the rest of our biology adapts to that. So perhaps we can have beautiful LED lights that give us this impression, like a hazy blue with a little bit of red early in the morning as all the astronauts wake up, like a bright, warming light in the middle of the day, and perhaps like a lingering orange hues at the end of the day. Next, we're going to talk about sounds. So I mentioned earlier that it's quite loud in a space station or a crew transfer module to go to Mars or anything. And so, you know, on top of the sound, like we can do like some sound reduction and noise canceling technology, but there are also certain sounds that are very comforting to us, right? Like we are not necessarily aware of waking up to the sound of a rooster, or having the dog or you know, barking in the distance, or birds chirping throughout the day. But when you remove all of those things by living in space for an extended amount of time, your subconscious and perhaps your conscious notices it, and you feel very destabilized. So by adding these very familiar and very discrete sound in the environment, it really creates this beautiful space for people to feel comforted and supported. Oh, and the last one is that I wanted to cover is smell. So I can lecture you an entire hour about how horrible a space station smells like, especially, you know, one like the ISS that's been in space for almost 25 years. Because the air has been recycled again and again, people don't necessarily shower every day. They work out about 2.5 hours a day every day in order to keep their bone mass and muscle mass as well. So, you know, there's a lot of like materials that like keeping the smells and the discomfort of all of that for years and years and years. On top of that, the ventilation is quite limited, right? You can't open a window in space just to air things out. Things stay inside for a very long time, and you can imagine how awful this is. So there are certain, you know, smells and plants, perhaps, that we can include in the environment. The plants themselves can absorb some odors and some chemicals to help with all of that. We can also add some essential oils and different types of nice smelling odors to help with all that. So a lot of you have flown to Abu Dhabi or Dubai, and perhaps you've flown an overnight flight. And you might have noticed that in the morning, as the airplane is trying to wake you up, the light is coming up very slowly, and you might have smelled some like citrusy, kind of like essential oil coming into the cabin. So this was specifically designed to help people wake up together in a calm manner. So we can definitely do certain things like this throughout the day, making sure that, you know, consciously and subconsciously, that people are comfortable throughout the day.
So a couple of years ago, we partook in a competition by NASA and the Canadian Space Agency. It's called the Deep Space Food Challenge. And it really explored what happens when we go farther than the moon. What happens when we're out in deep space longer than 6 months? The current protocol for NASA is to, send you up with meals ready to eat. It's usually a meal in a bag. The other protocol is to shuttle food up regularly. When they're low on food, they can bring up food to the ISS, and that would be fresh fruits and vegetables and things like that. And the third one is using freeze-dried food. Now, freeze-dried food seems to be the best option for going deep space, but it is freeze-dried food. It doesn't have the texture, all that love that we love about food, or the flavor. And you have to think about it. When you rehydrate it, you're rehydrating it with the recycled water that's been in the spacecraft or the ISS for 25 some years, and who knows where that water came from in the first place. So the idea is a little bit funny. So when we competed, we explored the idea of not recreating food, but celebrating what we already have here on planet Earth. And we did that through what we call a space kitchen. we had 4 different elements to the space kitchen. The first one is an aeroponic garden, similar to a hydroponic garden, except we're using minute amounts of water and targeted nutrients. But it creates a wall of green that you can start to prune and pick your vegetables. So not only is it giving you the nutrients you need, but psychologically, it's something familiar to what we have here on planet Earth. The second thing is what we call a creaming machine. And what's nice about the creaming machine is current conditions mean that you're an astronaut, you're getting your food in a bag, it's coffee, you might get a little bit of cream pre-mixed. Well, the creaming machine is a rotor-stator that allows you to mix polar fluids in a very, very beautiful way. So suddenly you can create a really creamy latte or a really creamy cappuccino. And this is something we haven't done before in outer space. The next one is tackles a problem that Phnam just mentioned, and that was really, we see people aging in outer space. Mark Kelly, when he was brought back to planet Earth and compared against his identical twin brother, they saw that he was aging through all the different things having to do with, radiation in outer space, bone density loss, stress, things like that. Well, we also found out that superfood, like microalgae, can fight those effects of aging in outer space. So we built an algae bioreactor for our space kitchen. And each bioreactor produces a number of algae. You can dehydrate it and eat it. Then lies the problem, the algae tastes like algae. It's kind of a horrible, salty, funky flavor. But when you start to mix it with other shelf-stable things like nut butters and, salty foods or sweet foods, you can have savory and sweet nutrients throughout your trip. But the sort of culmination of all this was that final part of the space kitchen that we actually love, and we call it the space barbecue. So if you know anything about NASA, they just don't like fire in space. I think it has something to do with the oxygen-rich environment or whatever, but who doesn't love a good barbecue? We've seen throughout history that people go and they celebrate birthdays and holidays and regular events. The foundation of modern humans is probably based upon fire, right? So we wanted to bring that sort of grilled experience to outer space. So we created a laser barbecue. We can take our protein, we can paint it, so to speak, brush it with a carbohydrate, laser grill marks on it, so it's very familiar, and the laser hits the carbohydrates, creates sort of a Maillard effect that really allows a depth of flavor profiles like we see in all of our grilled food. So this is the kind of thing we want to do, is we don't want to change humans just to go out in space. We want to figure out how to bring a little bit of humanity into deep space.
Next, we're going to talk about working in space. A lot of people ask me, like, why do we go to space? Why do we spend billions of dollars and effort and training into sending just a select few to this environment? That's because a lot of wonderful things came from space. When we think about the convenient life that we live today, using GPS to come to this venue, for example, or people who have missing limbs are using prosthetics that fit their body. Solar panels, water filtration systems to make sure that you don't poison yourself. All of these technologies that are so ubiquitous to modern life actually came from space. And so we want to continue that tradition of taking that extreme environment of space and accelerate innovation and bring back this innovation to service all of us living back here. Working in space is also about doing research that is life-saving for the next generation of people. Research in biotech, including stem cell research, cancer, longevity, diabetes, and other life-threatening situations here. So when we think about designing the future of a space station or a crew transfer module to look like home, we also have to be talking about working from home. So a lot of us have experienced this a few years ago during COVID, where we had to work in the same environment as the one that we live. And that's basically how astronauts are doing it right now. So there's a lot of learning that comes from that. How do we separate the work area from the entertainment area from the private area? Making sure that not everything is mingled like it is right now because of lack of space and all that. So really creating these boundaries between that personal and professional space, especially when we're going to have more commercial space companies in the future offering tickets for perhaps like biotech or pharmaceutical companies to work together in the same environment when the intellectual property might be overlapping in the same space. So lots of things to be working on here. But on the other side of work, we also have to think about self-care and reflections. It's quite the adventure to go to space. It's quite the privilege to have been chosen to go up there. Less than 700 people in the world have ever been to space, which is crazy, right? And this number is going to go higher and higher, and it has to go higher, because the more people we're able to send up there, the cheaper the flight to go up to space is going to happen. And so when we think about self-care, we think about our personal spaces, our private quarters. But perhaps there's some of that work that's happening inside of us as well, right? We think about perhaps meditation when we look back at the Earth and we see a lot of astronauts actually realize that there are no borders between countries, and they don't really understand why we're warring at each other so much. When they see the Earth that looks like a blue marble floating in the darkness of space, they realize how fragile she is, especially when you look at how thin the atmosphere is and all the biosphere of this planet living within it. So, also when it comes to self-care, a lot of the work that we might do for ourselves has to do with grounding. But what does grounding look like when there's no ground? So one thing I wanted all of you to walk out today with is, the reason why we go to space is really for caring for Earth. Because we talked to you about how to design like a space station in a way that's very responsible towards humans, make sure that we are supported sensorially and personally. But our home is also Earth. So as we go to space and we look back at our beautiful home, we want to make sure that like every ounce of technological advancement, of connection, of discovery, of innovation that we find up there is for the benefit of each and every one of us. Thank you very much.